Please be aware, in this podcast series we talk about all areas of safeguarding, which some people may find upsetting. So please make sure you're okay listening to today's topic. Be mindful of those around you, such as children, that you might not want to listen in. Hi, I'm SSS Safeguarding Director Sam Preston.
And I'm former head teacher and content author Sara.
Welcome to today's podcast. Today we're asking the question, are SENDCOs managing amid rising pressures? Now, Sarah, the role of Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Coordinators, or SENDCOs as we call them, it's incredibly demanding. So can you maybe start by giving a bit of an overview of the current pressures and challenges that these professionals face?
Yeah, absolutely. The role of SENDCOs is absolutely critical in ensuring that children with special educational needs, and disabilities receive the support they need. However, recent research has brought to light some significant challenges. A recent survey has revealed that SENDCOs and senior school leaders are feeling increasingly vulnerable due to the escalating needs and insufficient resources. And the situation has been really exacerbated by the pandemic as well.
Yeah, I was looking at some government statistics, and according to those stats, over 1.5 million pupils in England are now classified as having special educational needs. A staggering number, and schools are required to meet these diverse needs adequately. And as you've said, it's exacerbated by limited funding and resources, and it's a really urgent and challenging task for schools to provide the necessary and needed support. So the survey mentioned some specific concerns raised by both SENDCOs and senior leaders. So can you sort of elaborate on those, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. The survey showed that 2/3 of SENDCOs feel that current regulations leave them exposed. So this vulnerability is less felt amongst senior leaders. Only 47% shared that same sentiment. The disconnect highlights a gap in understanding and awareness of the unique challenges SENDCOs face. Senior leaders often cited challenges from parents and carers, constrained resources, and balancing SEND priorities with other school initiatives. Well, in addition, SENDCOs pointed to a lack of resources within schools and difficulties in securing support from external agencies as their top concerns. These discrepancies, they highlight the need for improved communication and understanding between SENDCOs and other senior leaders, really.
Yeah, and access to services. I mean, I'm thinking, services like speech and language therapy, very much needed, but not resourced to meet the demand that's there.
Absolutely, that's right, Sam.
So there seems to be a significant discrepancy in the perceptions of senior leaders and SENDCOs. So what are some of the most pressing issues affecting SENDCOs directly?
Well, one of the most pressing issues is the high workload and lack of support, which contribute to a high turnover rates among SENDCOs. Factors such as emotional trauma, insufficient funds, and overwhelming workload, the key drivers behind this turnover. The continuity and quality of SEN provision suffer as a result. Additionally, the survey uncovered gaps in knowledge and understanding of SEND among school staff, with some senior leaders admitting to limited expertise in supporting children with SEND. This lack of expertise, it can lead to inadequate support for students with SEND, further exacerbating those challenges faced by SENDCOs.
So you mentioned the importance of training. What specific training and support measures do you believe are necessary to better equip school staff to better support pupils that have been identified as falling within this category?
Well, I think enhanced training programs, are essential. These should include comprehensive training on recognising and managing aggressive or challenging behaviours, understanding individual education, health and care plans, EHCPs, and employing effective de-escalation techniques. Schools should also, provide regular professional development opportunities to ensure that the staff are up to date with the latest best practices and legal requirements. Moreover, creating a sort of culture of collaboration and open communication among staff it can really help that in sharing insights and strategies for supporting students with SEND. So I think this collaborative approach can significantly improve the overall effectiveness of the provision for SEND in the school.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, when you're talking about keeping up to date, it's also worth just noting that education healthcare plans, they're not static, they change. And so it's also making sure everybody who's going to be supporting a child with an AHCP in place is working to the latest plan. Because I know that that's been an issue.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the idea of different models for the SENDCO role. So do you maybe go through some of these models and highlight the potential advantages and challenges?
Well, yeah, there are several sort of models of SENCO role, each with its own set of advantages and challenges. One model is having the SENCO as part of the senior leadership team. Certainly when I was ahead, that was, our SENCO was an integral part of the SLT. And this model allowed the SENCO to influence the strategic direction of SEND within the school and ensure it remains a priority. However, balancing SLT duties with the day-to-day responsibilities of SEND, of the SENCO, can be really challenging, especially without adequate administrative support.
Yeah, I can see the challenge there.
Yeah. And another model involves appointing a deputy SENCO, who can share that workload. And this approach provides a collaborative strategic vision and allows for on-the-job professional development for the deputy. Certainly something I did as a head teacher. I always had a one-in-waiting type model where I always had somebody else training up, so provided a deputisation role for each of the key sort of positions in school. And I think this also facilitates succession planning. However, budget constraints can make it difficult to implement this model effectively, but sometimes it's also about using performance management to ascertain those members of staff who have got an interest in particular areas. So it may not necessarily be a monetary need within the school. You might not need to actually pay, but you might need to be able to use that as a career development aspect. And lastly, there's the associate SLT SENCO model, and that's where the SENCO attends SLT meetings and is line managed by the head teacher, but does not take on additional SLT duties. And this model allows the SENCO to focus on the strategic SEND issues without being overburdened with other SLT responsibilities. That's the model I used a lot, ensuring that the role has a genuine influence and impact, depends heavily on how it's presented and supported by the head teacher. But by having that SENCO as part of your SLT for meetings and to discuss those key SEND priorities in school really help drive that strategic direction of the school and put funding into areas that really made a difference. And I think that's particularly pertinent where you've got a school with really high SEND needs.
So, the models you've outlined, they offer interesting approaches. What steps can schools take to ensure that the SENCO role is actually impactful, regardless of what structure they decide on?
Well, I think the key is to focus on impact rather than status. Schools should ensure that the SENCO is supported by the head teacher and the rest of the SLT, including governors as well. There should be a really clear strategic vision for SEND, and the SENCO should be empowered to influence colleagues and impact pupil outcomes. Additionally, managing the SENCO's workload is absolutely crucial, and this might involve providing administrative support or adjusting teaching commitments. I mean, there's very much different models of how much teaching commitment that SENCOs have, again, depending on the size of the school, the number of SEND pupils. Certainly within my schools, because they were large schools, my SENCO was virtually non-teaching, but did deliver intervention groups for particular children with SEND needs. I think listening to SENCOs and involving them in decision-making processes can also help in creating that supportive environment that enables them to thrive. I think furthermore, regular evaluations and feedback can help in that continuously improving the effectiveness of SEND provision throughout the whole school.
I'm just struck by your comment, listening to SENDCOs, because I think that's from obviously this survey and, various things that have been in the press. It's quite clear that SENDCOs are really, really, really struggling. And it's not an unknown difficulty, and yet there doesn't seem to be any action. And I'm sort of thinking at the SLT, also have the opportunity to take that strategic direction outside their own school as well, to be lobbying as, with the communications that they have collectively as head teachers, for example, or in their communications with the local authorities.
Yeah, definitely. I did a lot of that.
Yeah, exactly. There's a role there, I think, to play for SLT. So given the increasing number of pupils with SEND, what immediate actions should be taken if we're going to support these SENDCos? What's the immediate action we need to really ensure that effective provision?
Yeah, well, immediate actions include increasing funding. The funding for SEND provision is not adequate enough. Certainly with models, from the high needs block within local authorities, they're squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. So, providing comprehensive training for all school staff is really important, because I think there's a tendency within schools for other staff to not realise the importance of that SENCO role sometimes, and what their role is and how they actually do that role and what other staff can do to support them. So improving access to external support agencies, obviously, and services is crucial, and they are massively overstretched and underfunded. Schools should also, implement that sort of robust reporting and monitoring systems to track the progress and the well-being of pupils with SEND. Certainly, that's a very key role of a designated governor. I had an extremely active SEND governor who would always ask those questions and monitored and work with the senior leaders and the SENCO. Furthermore, fostering that culture of collaboration and open communication amongst the staff can help in sharing best practices and strategies for supporting those students effectively. This collaborative approach, it really does help addressing the challenges faced by SENCOs and ensuring that pupils with SEND receive the support they need. So money, training and external services, that, there's a big piece of work going forward. Be interested to see what happens post-election about needs for SEND within primary school or within all schools. Yeah.
So it's clear that this role, it's incredibly complex, it's demanding. What further support do on the ground do SENCOs need?
Well, they do require a really multifaceted approach that includes adequate funding, comprehensive training and supporting school culture, really, really important. And I think it's important to recognise the critical role that the SENCOs play in ensuring the inclusive education and providing with the resources and support they need to succeed. I think, again, talking about working together, we often talk about working together, but it really does require that to create the environment where all the students, regardless of their needs, can thrive and reach their full potential. I think listening to SENCOs, as we've talked earlier, Sam, listening to them, involving them in decision-making processes, it really is absolutely crucial. If a SENCO's feeling overwhelmed, there needs to be a mechanism of how they can offload, how they can be supported. I would always suggest that senior leaders have some sort of supervision process for SENCOs, because their load is massive, and it isn't just their load. They're the strategic overviewer under the senior leaders, but it is the responsibility of everybody who works within a school setting to meet the needs of children with SEND needs. So, regular evaluations and feedback, it really is crucial to improve that effectiveness.
Well, there definitely needs to be more funding to address this, and it's a growing issue. It's only becoming more problematic. One factor we haven't really touched on is safeguarding. We know statistically that children with SEND are more at risk, they're more vulnerable. So there needs to be that combined approach of supporting, the health, well-being and educational outcomes. There's also a significant issue concerning the potential vulnerabilities of home-educated children, particularly those with SEND. And I know you've written an article on this recently, which actually is available on our website if listeners want to access it. So could you maybe just elaborate on the findings of the recent independent review into this?
Yeah, absolutely, Sam. An independent review into the deaths and abuse of 41 home-educated children has revealed a sort of concerning trend, actually. These children are particularly vulnerable due to the absence of those protective factors that typically are provided by schools. And the findings that published by the Child Safeguarding Practice Review Panel highlighted significant gaps in safeguarding efforts for children not enrolled in that sort of traditional educational settings. There's some really key things there. And you see on the media a lot where Parents who haven't been able to get an adequate placement for their child with SEND are then forced into a home education situation. And then obviously there's a vulnerability that's not being picked up on a day-to-day measure with those children. That's a key issue. Yeah.
And there were specific vulnerabilities highlighted in the report, which I found deeply worrying. The report covered, I think it was 27 referrals between August 2020 and October 2021. And it painted a really grim picture of the experience of children not attending school. These children who did not benefit from the oversight and support structures of the education system, as we've talked about. They were subjected to various forms of abuse, including sexual and physical abuse, as well as neglect. And tragically, 6 children lost their lives. And I think 35 suffered what we would categorise as serious harm.
Absolutely. Really, really worrying statistics, Sam. One of the key revelations is that diminished visibility of home educated children to safeguarding agencies compared to their peers in school. And without regular contact with education establishments, these children often fly under the radar, leaving them more vulnerable to abuse and neglect. It's really, really worrying. And adding that complexity of SEND needs as well, then the vulnerability is magnified.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know schools are best placed because of that regular contact and having access and systems in place to really pick up and hopefully pick up things early. You just don't have that support. That absence of schools' protective environment, it really can have severe consequences. So what systemic challenges did the report identify, the panel, in addressing the welfare of home educated children?
Well, the report identified several systemic challenges, including limited legislative powers, that's a word that I find hard to say, and guidance that hampered practitioners' ability to monitor and intervene effectively. The lack of resources and capacity within elective home education teams was further exacerbated that issue, with some teams consisting of only 1 or 2 part-time staff, at a local authority level. Additionally, the significant role, of religious or faith-based teaching in some cases of serious harm was noted. Children subjected to such teaching, they often experience prolonged physical chastisement and were isolated from the outside world, further again exacerbating that vulnerability. Really worrying.
So there's a crucial need for improved measures to safeguard these children, and there are proposals that have been put forward by the panel. So what protective measures are being proposed?
Well, the panel emphasised the need for proactive measures to safeguard the small minority of home educated children who are at risk. Proposals include the creation of a statutory register of home educated children to improve visibility and ensure relevant agencies have the necessary information to intervene when needed. Additionally, expanding the scope of local authorities' responsibilities and establishing schools as a fourth statutory safeguarding partner are being considered. And we do think that potentially keeping children safe next year may come up with that. The panel also supports greater involvement in safeguarding partnerships, and it urges the inclusion of children's voices and needs in that decision-making processes. Quite a lot there that they want to put in place for those proactive measures.
It's really interesting, this consideration of education as the fourth statutory safeguarding partner. I mean, this has been on the radar since we had, from their earliest format of the safeguarding partnerships, and I really struggle to see why they're not at that level. Although they are what they call a relevant agency, which means they've got to adhere to everything, and they are sort of part of that process, but they're not driving the strategic vision. And I think there's a lot of expertise out there that really benefit in terms of that strategic direction, getting involved at that level. So these measures you've described, they're essential for enhancing the protection of home educated children. What thoughts would you like to share about the intersection of SEND provision and the safeguarding of vulnerable children?
Well, the intersection of SEND provision and the safeguarding vulnerable children highlights the importance of comprehensive support systems and proactive measures. Whether in traditional schools or home education settings, children with SEND require dedicated resources, informed staff, and robust safeguarding practices. It's crucial that policymakers, educators, and caregivers work collaboratively to ensure that all children, regardless of their educational setting, receive that protection and support that they need. They really need that.
Yeah, I mean, we really need to address the gaps in safeguarding practices here and really implement robust measures so every child is afforded that protection and the care that they deserve. I mean, we know it's crucial to equip and support SENDCOs. And if we're going to create inclusive and effective educational environments, it's really important to keep this vulnerable group of children safe. So we'll be keeping a close eye on central government direction as things, we're obviously at the time of recording, we're in the run up to a general election. So let's hope that the planned extensive changes to keeping children safe in education next year, that they will set more protective measures to support these children and the practitioners supporting them.